Welcome back. In this lecture, we are going to understand state in comparative perspective. Right? We have seen state in a quite a detail while we were studying paper one, and we have seen state. We have seen types of state. We have seen state from multiple perspective. Let's say liberal perspective, neoliberal perspective, feminist perspective, and most importantly, Marxist perspective, which is quite comprehensive than other perspectives, right? So, state in comparative perspectives, we what will essentially do is just get a gist of whatever we have studied till now, right? That is the idea, and try to connect it to comparative politics, right? How do you connect a particular thing to comparative politics, or a subject matter to comparative politics? One, either you use comparative method, or second, or you apply or see the real world application of a particular thing, and third, you see changing nature of a particular thing, right? Mm, so what will be our primary focus on? Our primary focus on these three things. That is, number one, to compare a particular system; number two, to see real world application; and number three, actually number three, actually see the changing nature, see the evolution of a particular type of state. That is the idea. So let's start. State in comparative perspective. State in comparative perspective. So number one, we'll start with state. What is state? State is more or less connected with sovereignty. State, number one, needs sovereignty. State needs territory. State needs people, and state need government. These are the four primary features of a state: sovereignty, territory, people, and government. Right? When you read NCRTs, these are the four primary elements that are given, and these are widely accepted to be the four primary elements of a state. Right? Now we are seeing it in comparative perspective. We are seeing these four elements in comparative perspective. So we have to see traditionalist. We have to compare traditionalist with behavioralist and with neo-institutionalist. Right? Always connect last topic with first topic. So you see decline, again decline, right? Decline, solution was behavioralism; decline and solution was neo-institutionalism or post-behavioralism, right? So traditional view is, what is traditional view with respect to state? That state is status quoist. State is static, right? As we can see through Garner, his statement that uh, there is one quote of Garner which he says that state is the most important element of respect to political science, uh, and this was Garner, right? Then then came behavioralist. Behavioralist, how behavioralists explain state is through systems approach, and behavioralists say that state is a processor for inputs and feedback. State is a processor for inputs and feedback. That is how behavioralists see state. And who who is the biggest name? Who is the biggest behavioral name? It is Easton, right? Then again decline happened. Then neo-institutionalism came, whereby we see marriage of behavioralism and traditionalism, right? And the biggest name is Theda Skocpol. March and Olson is also there, but Theda Skocpol, right? Theda Skocpol. So this is how comparatively, with respect to traditional approaches, with respect to behavioralist approach, and with respect to neo-institutionalist approach, how state is seen, right? How state is seen. The the quote of Garner was political science begin and ends with state. This is a very good quote to start your intro, to start your questions. So political science begins and ends with state. Political science begins and ends with state. Right? So traditionalist, behavioralist, and neo-institutionalist. That is how state as a concept evolved within political science. That is how we compare state with respect to different political approaches. Traditionalists see state as status quo, is static. A behavioralist sees state as a processor, as a machine, and neo-institutionalist see state from behavioral and traditional approach both at the same time. Right? We understood what is neo-institutionalism. It is double boundedness. Uh, it is there. There are three models basically. Rational actor model. What it basically wants to say that actor is shaped by institutions, actor is limited by institution, and institutions are shaped by actors. So behavioralism and traditional approach both are applicable at the same time. Right? That was the idea behind neo-institutionalism. Behind neo-institutionalism. Right, we can also compare state with respect to different political ideologies or different these were approaches, right? These were approaches to political science, but traditional approaches have different philosophies like liberalism, Marxism. Behavioralism has different philosophies like elitist school of power, pluralist school of power. Traditionalist also has feminist, and neo-institutionalist is a thing of themselves, right? So we can also compare state with respect to philosophies, how philosophy sees state. So that analysis has to be there. That is, this was comparative analysis of state with respect to approaches. These are approaches. These are not philosophies, but these are approaches. We also have to see state in comparative perspective with respect to philosophies. This was approaches we have to see with respect to philosophies. That is comparative nature of state with respect to philosophies. So the I can either make the horizontal diagram or the vertical diagram. I am going to make a vertical diagram because it is not going to be very, it is not going to fit. Basically, it is not going to fit. So or I can do this, right? Yes, I can do this. So liberal perspective, liberal point of view. How does liberal point of view see state? How does liberal point of view see state? Liberals view state as neutral arbiter. Liberals view state as regulator. For liberals, market is their god, and for liberals, minimum government, maximum governance is the way to go about it. Right? Again, remember Locke, remember Nozick, remember Friedman, and all those people. Right? Liberal, neoliberal, all more or less say the same thing. That state should be limited to only regulatory functions. State should perform only three functions, which is legislation, execution, and adjudication. This is liberal view. This is liberal view of state. Now we have to see, in comparison to liberal view, how Marxist view state. Right? These kind of questions come. So how Marxist view state? How Marxist view state? So Marxist view, there are two views with respect to Marxism, with respect to state. First is instrumentalist view. Right, I will first compare it to liberal view, then we'll compare. Then we, of course, we have understood instrumentalist and relatively autonomy school, but again we will see it one more time. So what Marxists want to say that state is not, right, in comparison to liberalism, state is not neutral arbiter. State is player itself. Number one. State is not neutral arbiter. State is player himself. Number two, what Marxists say that we do not need state. No need of state. They imagine their society to be stateless and classless, right? That is the idea. So they do not believe in existence of state. They do not see any value or utility with respect to state. That is Marxist view. So what Marxist, this is Marxist view, and there are two schools of thought in Marxism. The first school of thought is instrumentalist school of thought. Second is relative autonomy. First is instrumentalist school of thought. Second is relative autonomy. That is the idea. Instrumentalist, what instrumentalists say that state is an instrument of capitalist class. Relative autonomy approach say that no, this is not true. State is not an instrument, but state is a player in itself, right? The two we have done. Then there is elite school elite school philosophy on state. What elite schools say we are going to see, but what they basically want to say is that the concept of power elite, we are going to see it in democracy, right? Robert de Hull, CW Mills, uh, Pareto and all those people, we will try to see in democracy what it basically wants to say, that the power is concentrated with few elite people, right? We are going to see it, don't worry. Then with respect to elite school, there is another school, pluralist school. Don't worry, we are going to see this. What it basically wants to say, that what elite school people say, that there are some power elite in which power is concentrated. What pluralists say, it is not true. What pluralists say, that elite school, pluralist school basically is criticism of elite school. Pluralists say that power is not concentrated, but power is diffused with multiple actors, right? They talk about power diffusion. Don't worry, we are going to understand both pluralist and elitist school in theory of democracy, right? Because it fits there more appropriately. Then there is feminist school of thought. Feminist school of thought, feminism is a meta ideology. Feminism is a methodology, and feminist school of thought has multiple schools. But what is one common thread which binds all feminist school is that they are all against patriarchy. Again, within feminism, you see there is liberalism, Marxism, socialism. There is radical feminism. There is post feminism. There is postmodern feminism. Right, all these kinds of feminism are there. There is also Nordic feminist, Australian democrats, right? That is also there. So feminist school of thought is also there with respect to state. They are all against patriarchy, but within feminism there are multiple schools of thought, right? There is post-colonial feminism as well. So the last thing that we are going to see comparatively is postmodern idea of state, right? And one thing that that explains the postmodern idea of state is concept of governmentality, panopticon view of power, panopticon view of power. Remember Foucault, right? What Foucault says sociological view of power, right? Sociological view of power, panopticon view of power. What he wants to say, that modern state does not have to apply power or exercise authority in public view. The exercise of power is more subtle, right? Exercise of power is more subtle, and the postmodern state is exercising power through things like surveys, through things like meta narratives, and you are molded in a such a way that you regulate yourself. You have fear that someone is watching over you all the time. That is why you regulate yourselves, and exercise of power is very subtle. That is the idea. So this is how, with respect to state, multiple philosophies are there. So liberals say one thing, Marxists say another thing, elite school and pluralists say another thing, feminists say another thing, and postmodern say another thing. That is how they compare. If a question comes on comparative nature of state, you have to write what different philosophies say about state. That is the idea.